one more segment here for this Thursday edition of the show. We'll bring on a familiar voice that we haven't heard from in a while. That is Alex Nicolas from Miner Rush, the SB Nation home of the UTEP Miners. Alex, how's it going today, man?
Not bad, Adam. Not bad. Thanks for having me, man.
I appreciate it. Good to get you back on the show here. And I figure it's a pretty good week to do it because Conference USA gets a little bit of a share of the spotlight here this week with a couple of games coming up on Friday night. We'll go ahead and dive right on into those here. Game 307, 308 on the rotation board. Western Kentucky takes on Old Dominion. Hilltoppers anywhere from a 9.5 to a 10.5 point favorite. Most of the market showing 10. But, Alex, this isn't the Western Kentucky team that we saw under the Jeff Brom era.
No, it isn't. It's totally different. I mean, you go from spread, air raid, having talent receivers everywhere to kind of this spread, inverted veer type of control the ground, control the line of scrimmage, control the football offense, which I was able to see a couple weeks ago from Western Kentucky, and it's totally different. It really is. And, this game against Old Dominion is going to be a true test, in my opinion, to see how far Western Kentucky has come along ever since really their loss against Louisiana Tech back in mid-September. You play a Ball State team that's kind of, I guess you could say, a middle-of-the-pack team, in the MAC, and then you play two of the worst teams in Conference USA and UTEP, which you struggle on the road, and then you come back and then you thrash Charlotte last week. My big concern this week of Western Kentucky is how can they get Mike White going to being able to become a factor again. Mike White's kind of been a non-factor after he was probably most arguably one of the best quarterbacks in the group of five last season. So for me, it's going to be about how well has Western Kentucky really come along over the past 2 to 3 weeks after it looked like, when they played UTEP, it looks like this team could probably struggle offensively, but they got it together like that they should have against Charlotte. Now against another struggling team against Old Dominion, the S&P projections have them as 12.5 point favorites here. So I kind of lean with that. I think Western Kentucky finally is able to kind of get right before they have, before they host Florida Atlantic in a couple of weeks. But that game's going to be tough. It's going to be tough on the road because Old Dominion does have a great home field advantage. And I think that could be kind of a close game, but I wouldn't be surprised to see Western Kentucky win by 2 scores and being able to kind of get their run game going as they did last week.
One of the things that you and I have talked about in Conference USA, both on the football side and on the basketball side, is that there are some really challenging travel spots in this conference. It is very, very spread out. For Western Kentucky here, they got to go all the way out to Norfolk, which, obviously is a place that they go, once every couple of years. And it can be a real challenge to do that. Now, on the Old Dominion side here, I mean, this poor team, they have been ravaged by injuries this season. They lose Ray Lowry, who's the all-time leading rusher in program history, and it's not even close either, and he still has eligibility left. That's how good he's been for this Monarchs program. They lose Jonathan Duhart, their top wide receiver for the season. They had a 17-year-old quarterback in Stephen Williams starting games for them, I think, as of week 3 of the season, and he's still out there as a starter now. But they're starting to get healthier. Lowry's back, although he's not back to what he was with a hamstring injury. Bobby Wilder's a guy that really maximizes talent well. They made it to a bowl game last year, won in the Bahamas. It was a landmark season for the Monarchs. This is not a team that's going to quit, and they're starting to get a little bit healthier. So do we see the ceiling rise a little bit for this team as they go forward?
And you said it, you hit it right on the head when you're talking about one of my favorite coaches in Conference USA, in Bobby Wilder. And that formula could kind of come to fruition this week at home. Lowry last week had kind of almost a Ray Lowry, like 19 carries for 84 yards, and I really like Jeremy Cox. And now you're starting to see Stephen Williams, even though, you're looking at some of their passing numbers, they're still 126 in passing S&P plus and passing rate success. So you're seeing maybe with their health and with a guy like Ray Lowry, which really demands a lot of attention with what Old Dominion does, I think that could be kind of a perfect mix for an upset. And that's why I think this game could be very close than what the S&P projections are saying. And I think you add those 2 dimensions, and obviously you're not going to get Durhart back anytime soon, unfortunately. But, that mix right there with what Bobby Wilder can do with his charisma and the way that he gets the most out of his teams at home on this one, a national televised game, like I mentioned, Old Dominion shows up very well at their place. This could be kind of that quote-unquote, I don't even know if you want to call it a trap game for Western Kentucky, as well as they've been playing the past couple of weeks in terms of just getting bright. But you're right. I think that could play into a factor in this game in terms of Bobby Wilder getting not only his horses back, but the way that he can get the most out of his team. And they kind of have that underdog mentality. They should have that underdog mentality, because coming into the season, I was a lot higher than I was on Old Dominion than they actually are. And that's attributed mainly to injuries, but that is going to be a very interesting factor, which could make this game a close one. And I mean, heck, even if Old Dominion upsets it, you know where that's coming from. Bobby Wilder is a magician. He's shown it before, but can he do it, with a team that's kind of been beaten up in a sense over the past couple of weeks injury-wise? That's going to be a big thing that to watch this week for sure.
All right, so we go from Norfolk, and that game's on CBS Sports Network Friday night, down to Murfreesboro, Tennessee. Middle Tennessee State hosts Marshall. Now, Marshall was a team in the betting markets prior to the season that got a lot of love from a season win total standpoint. A lot of people expecting a bounce back from Doc Holliday's program. Well, it's happened, because Marshall's 5-1 here on the year. They've given up 6 points the last 2 weeks, 21 points over their last 4 games. They're doing it with defense, which is kind of a surprise based on what we traditionally know about Marshall.
Yeah, it is. And you're looking at what Marshall hasn't done offensively, and you're looking at, some of their numbers that are ranked on, the 120s in some of my favorite advanced stats. You're looking at rushing success rate. You're looking at even their their passing success rate, even though it's in the mid-50s, but that's un-Marshall-like from when we've seen Marshall being able to dominate the previous, 3 years before for the last 3 years when they had Rakeem Cato and, Devin Johnson and all those studs on offense. And now you're seeing what they've been able to do defensively, and they just totally shut down Charlotte. They totally shut down Old Dominion, and they even gave Cincinnati some fits a couple weeks ago defensively. So the big question, though, in this game is the health of Brent Stockstill, and that's really going to kind of dictate, I think, how good Marshall can be defensively. Without Stockstill, I mean, this Marshall team could probably hold Middle Tennessee maybe to another for a third straight week, hold somebody to 3 points. But their defense, I mean, this is something that Doc Holliday, and I've talked about it here, I've talked about it in a couple other places, about how well Doc Holliday's been able to recruit the defensive side of the ball, particularly defensive backs and linebackers from the state of Florida. And now you're really seeing that come to fruition. I mean, they have the 12th best havoc rate out of all linebackers in FBS. And you're looking at their defensive havoc rate is 33rd. It's well above the national average at 7.8 is what you're seeing from this Marshall defense, and that is going to be tough for anybody to overcome, and particularly anybody in Conference USA, particularly in the East, where you're seeing maybe not that, as Conference USA has been known as a passing league, now you're seeing kind of gaudy rushing numbers from teams out of the East, particularly FAU and Middle Tennessee. If Brent Stockstill plays, that's going to be interesting. That's going to be Marshall's really first test against a true team that can really spread out the ball and can really put points through the air, and that's going to be a big test for Marshall if Stockstill plays. But if not, I really think you'll see Marshall's defense continue to assert itself as a top unit, possibly in a whole group of 5 in terms of defensive production.
Unfortunately, Stockstill not going to go here this week. That was announced, I think, yesterday, that he's going to be unable to go with the collarbone, and at least they've got Richie James back, but Richie James last week just didn't look like himself. 7 catches, 47 yards. That's not who he is. That's not what he does. And part of that, of course, is the fact that Stockstill's not there at quarterback. So, for Middle Tennessee State, I mean, it's been a struggle for Tony Frank. I love Middle Tennessee State's coordinators, Tony Franklin and Scott Schaefer. Scott Schaefer is doing a hell of a job with this Blue Raiders defense. So if you are looking for an angle on this game, maybe the under probably something you'd be looking at. But I will ask you this here, Alex. Middle Tennessee State is not the same offense without Stockstill. We know that. We've already just discussed that. But for Marshall here, I mean, they play Kent State, who Kent State's one of the worst offensive teams in FBS. Cincinnati's got all sorts of problems. Luke Fickell doesn't know which end is up with that team right now. Charlotte's very bad. They haven't won a game. Old Dominion, we just talked about their injury problems. How good is this Marshall defense? I mean, we really haven't seen them get tested outside of that North Carolina State game.
And that's the big question. This is why I think this Friday game, if Brent Stockstill was available, would really tell us a lot about it. And honestly, looking at kind of their schedule, I don't know if we'll find out that true answer until November 3rd when they travel to Lane Kiffin land down there in Florida Atlantic. And you're right. I think the jury's still out. In our Conference USA poll that we run, they narrowly beat out North Texas for that number 1 spot. And I think North Texas right now seems to have kind of that complete team. But if we're talking about defense, Marshall truly has not been tested. And you're looking at kind of their schedule, they really won't face a quote-unquote high-powered offensive team until the last game of the season against Southern Miss. So, while they haven't been tested, you're looking at, their last 4 wins have all been teams that are ranked, no higher than 110 in the S&P Plus rating. So I think that is a legitimate question, a question that I think won't be tested out, like I mentioned, first until November 3rd against Florida Atlantic. But the talent is certainly there to being able to do that against these top 100 or bottom 100 teams, if you will, and to being able to, only give up, 29 points over the past 4 weeks and shutting out Kent State. I mean, that's still kind of impressive no matter who you're playing. But like you mentioned, that jury's still out, and a lot of people around Conference USA, a lot of people that I talk to are still kind of wondering how good is this Marshall defense when you match them against the Southern Miss, when you match them against a running attack like Florida Atlantic, and heck, even against, teams like veteran quarterbacks like Western Kentucky has one, UTSA has one. That will be definitely tested here in the next couple of weeks. But it's kind of, I guess you could say, for us to really kind of look at that, it sucks so that we don't get to see that against a potentially really good offense with Middle Tennessee and their quarterback. So I still think it'll be a couple of weeks before we figure out how good and how consistent can this Marshall defense continue to play and continue to carry them on the top of the Conference USA Eastern Division.
Well, as somebody that follows Conference USA, Alex, you have to love game 323, 324 here between North Texas and Florida Atlantic. The line movement on this game alone has been fascinating. Florida Atlantic opened a 6.5-point favorite at Bookmaker. Florida Atlantic is now a 3.5-point favorite at Bookmaker. And this is not what we would traditionally see given the situational spot for both of these teams. North Texas off of that very improbable win over UTSA where Mason Fine took a beating in that game. Florida Atlantic off of a bye with a first-year head coach, with a lot of talent, with an offensive coordinator like Kendall Briles. You would generally expect money to come in on the Owls in a spot like this because this situation really does favor them. But I guess it speaks to how much respect there is for the Mean Green out there.
Yeah, and I was kind of blown away a little bit by that opening line. I guess, FAU's been pretty impressive, but I really thought that North Texas' game last week earned them tons of respect, not only in the Conference USA blog sphere where a lot of people are now taking North Texas serious, but you're looking at the respect that Vegas is giving and how good offensively, in terms of the rush game FAU's been. So I was kind of blown away with not only Mason Fine being able to go 98 yards with no timeouts in a minute 27, but to see how that carried over to this week in this huge matchup. And, that's really, I think you're looking at a very confident North Texas team, and I think that confidence sometimes, looking at lines, maybe even going into college basketball season a little bit to see how Vegas kind of handicaps this thing. I think confidence is kind of a big deal when you're looking at these type of games, and I think that is really the reason why North Texas got a lot of respect in this one is because of the confidence, and you're playing with, possibly one of the best quarterbacks in Conference USA this particular year in Mason Fine, and he proved that last week. So I think confidence goes a big way for this line, and you have two of really the two surprising teams in Conference USA going at it. Who would have thought that this game would mean anything in terms of conference championship implications? And this game definitely has it. And that's going to be that's going to just be so much fireworks in this game coming up Saturday night. I believe it's Saturday night in Boca Raton.
Now, let me ask you this. We talked about Seth Littrell last year, I should say, and about that hire for North Texas. And, of course, they go to a bowl game. Now, they did it with a 5-7 record. They got in with their APR scores, but they got to go to a bowl. Most importantly for them, they got those extra 15 – well, it wasn't 15 practices because they played fairly early, but they got some of those extra practices there. And those are always important for a first-year head coach. Now, coming off of a road win at Southern Miss, which was a very impressive win in and of itself, and we'll talk about the Golden Eagles here in a few minutes, coming off that road win, coming back home, finding a way to beat UTSA, a team that made a bowl game last year as well. Now you go to this game. And the question that I have with North Texas at this point is, how much has their depth been built up under the two recruiting classes for Littrell? Because that's the concern that I would have for them here going out on the road again to Boca Raton is, do they have the depth to match up?
Offensively, I think they certainly do. Defensively, that is where the question is gonna lie. You know, that's really kind of the big question for North Texas coming into the season. And offensively, they've proved it, that they're able to have a guy like Jeffrey Wilson. You're looking at Jalen Guyton and a handful of receivers that have really came up and just done just straight up damage. I mean, there's no other way to put that. But defensively, how can this team hang against a team like Florida Atlantic that's going to want to control the clock, that's going to want to keep that football in their own hands? And Lane Kiffin, it really what it came down to, FAU's become a very one-dimensional football team in terms of the rush game. So can North Texas can their front seven really hang with the talented duo of running backs and Buddy Howell and Devin Singletary? And that's really going to be my question, is defensively, where will that depth come from? We're looking at their linebackers. North Texas has traditionally had pretty decent linebackers over the past couple seasons, but on the defensive line is where they've been really, really thin. And going back to last year when UTEP ran for over 400 on them, UTSA also had some big rushing games on them last year in the past couple of years. So depth defensively, more than anything, offensively, I think they're going to be just fine. I think this is a team that can put up points with anybody in Conference USA, but can they slow down? Can they have the depth in their front seven to slow down FAU? That is really, when we're looking at depth, I think that is a bigger question for North Texas in terms of can they hang with a fourth quarter against two really good running backs, a very physical offensive line and a physical running attack. That is going to be my question, and that's going to be something that we'll find out definitely after this week about how deep that North Texas front seven is and can they hang against the other rushing teams here in Conference USA.
So what do you think, Alex? I mean, can they hang? Is this a spot where you would take Florida Atlantic minus the 3.5? You think they put this game away in the second half? Or can North Texas, come up with another really huge effort and maybe, even win this game outright?
I think with a guy like Mason Fine, I put North Texas in every game. I think North Texas should be in this game. This is going to be a very close game. Could be a high-scoring game, but particularly if North Texas struggles stopping the run and Florida Atlantic able to get some of those chunk plays in the run game, I think that is going to actually play into North Texas' favor. Now, if Florida Atlantic's able to kind of lull them to sleep and go on 9, 12, 11-play drives, that could really, might want to look at the under at that point, if that's kind of what your feeling is on this game. But I think this kind of will go back and forth because, you're looking at North Texas' defense with so many a lot of inexperience in that front seven. I mean, really their most experienced player at this point is Keyshawn McClain, is their safety, and he's leading them in tackles, also has 3 run stuff. So that's going to be a big key. I'm looking at also Roderick Young, another defensive lineman that has 5 run stops. So if those guys can really, really shut down that FAU run game, it could go in North Texas' favor in terms of controlling the game with Jeffrey Wilson and Mason Fine. But I just don't see that happening. I see this game going back and forth, and I see it being another classic game. And until he proves me further, Mason Fine right now, he just has that it factor. He's a winner. And I think that is going to go a long way until basically whoever has the ball last, whether it's North Texas controlling the football or FAU controlling the football, trying to kill the clock, or North Texas trying to come back, down 2 or 3 points. I don't think you'll see this game get out of control either way. This will be a very, very close game, and whoever has the ball last and whoever can turn down those key turnovers down the stretch, I think will win this game. And I actually like North Texas on the road. I think they grew up last week. They've grown up the past couple of weeks, like you mentioned. Their win at Southern Miss, their win at home against UTSA. I think this team has grown up offensively, and no matter what situation they're going to be in, I think Mason Fine can help them win football games. And I'm going to take North Texas in what will be a slight upset to the odd makers, but I think in Conference USA land, that's what North Texas needs to do to prove that they're a championship contender, is win a game like this on the road.
I don't want to spend too much time on this game 337, 338 between UAB and Charlotte, because a lot of the line value has already come out of it. It opened UAB -4, up to UAB -7.5 here. But I do want to touch on this, and I've touched on this a couple times here throughout the week, and I obviously want to talk to a Conference USA guy about it. UAB, to me, is the best story in college football this year, and it's not even close.
I agree. I mean, Bill Clark is a magician. I mean, not only for what Bill Clark has done in the first, 6 games this year, but what Bill Clark's done over the past couple of years while they haven't had a football team, and having these kids believe, having these kids get better. And not only that, but to see how well their quarterback play is, to see how well they're able to rush the football with Spencer Brown, the running back. I mean, it's surreal to see this, and you're correct. It is the best story in college football. And for me, it's not about, the first half of the season. It's about what Bill Clark's done over the past couple of years without games, and how he's been able to keep this together and keeping guys believing, and now building an indoor facility. And it's really a tremendous story from, you don't have to be a Conference USA guy, just in college football in general, of how special it is. And I mean, really, UAB, the only thing they got to worry about is somebody coming in and poaching Bill Clark. So, it's a great story, and I'm happy for those guys. UAB is one of the most respected fan bases in Conference USA, and, to see them, have the success that they're having. And, that field goal block against Louisiana Tech a couple of weeks ago, that was magical. And that right there, it really turns a football season into almost a Disney story of how great Bill Clark and UAB have been this year.
And what I love, Alex, is, I know your ties are to UTEP. I know you follow the Miners closely, but I can hear you smiling as you're talking there about UTEP. And that's the biggest thing for me is, what a great story for these kids. And look, they've got 4 wins. They should beat Charlotte this week. Charlotte's winless on the year. They get Rice at home. They get UTEP at home. And we all know the situation with UTEP here so far. This team's got a very, very good shot at getting 6 wins, maybe even 7 wins, getting to a bowl game. And that would be absolutely awesome for them and for those kids that stuck it out, or those kids that have found a place to play, because Bill Clark had pretty much a full roster to go out there and fill. So it's a really, really great story. One more game I want to touch on with you here, and then we'll talk a little bit about UTEP to wrap things up. Southern Miss takes on Louisiana Tech on the road. Louisiana Tech down to a 2.5-point favorite here through the key number of 3. So Southern Miss, the preferred side for the professionals out there, lines in my power rating week after week after week. Apparently, I just don't know how good this team is.
Yeah, and I think the biggest thing is their quarterback play. They've had Quandra Griggs has been injured. Keon Howard, I mean, if he hasn't played UTEP, he's been very inconsistent. And I think that is kind of where that hit and miss is because we've been so used to the past couple of years, 4 years with Nick Mullins. We knew that you're getting 300 yards passing. You're going to get 120 from Edo Smith. Now this year you take away that explosive pass game. Now the pass catchers are still there. Your Allen Day Staggers. Robertson's another big play guy, but just quarterback play, inconsistency with quarterback play between Quandra Griggs and Keon Howard, that's really kind of been Southern Miss's quote-unquote downfall, even though they're still contending in Conference USA. But that's kind of where, looking at it from a betting angle, it's kind of hard to bet on them. You're looking at last week, they were heavy favorites against UTEP. Heck, I even took the 23, that Southern Miss was favored, and UTEP defense really showed out. And, Southern Miss still was able to cover, I believe, that game. I don't have the score right in front of me, even though I should remember it. But, I'm looking at quarterback play. That's kind of the difference of a Southern Miss team being able to have those big plays and being able to take a 14, 21-point game and being able to put back-to-back scores, and all of a sudden the score's 28-0, and you're in good position to cover, and that's really kind of been Southern Miss's downfall, just the lack of consistency at quarterback, and obviously that's going to happen after, a 4-year starter, and you're looking to replace them, and, it's just kind of, I'm pretty sure it's disappointing for Southern Miss fans to have that in their passing game, but you still have one of the most exciting backs in Conference USA and one of Conference USA's best NFL draft prospects in Edo Smith. So this game particularly, and on the road at Louisiana Tech, I really like Louisiana Tech at that 2.5 points. They've actually found something consistent at their quarterback. Is Jamar Smith is almost there on the cusp of becoming that star quarterback, and this could be a game that can kind of push him over that ledge if he has to, come from behind, which I think this will be a very close game with Southern Miss going to Edo Smith a lot. They didn't go to Edo Smith too much against UTEP, even though he had 28 carries. He got most of those carries in the second half, but I would look for Southern Miss to really, really ride Mr. Edo Smith this week.
All right, well, let's talk UTEP to wrap things up here, and obviously, I mean, the situation with this program is kind of a mess. I mean, they bring back Mike Price because they needed somebody to coach this team after Sean Cooler stepped down. They're 0-7. They played well the last 2 weeks. I mean, a close loss to Western Kentucky, and then the defense showed up last week against Southern Miss. But overall, the full body of work here for the Miners, just nothing to really get all that excited about. But like I said, the last 2 weeks, some moral victories. They played a lot better, did a decent job against Army in that triple option. Is UTEP maybe a play-on team here the rest of the way, or is this a situation where maybe this is just kind of a peak and then we're going to get another valley?
in terms of betting, I would look at games kind of like last week at Southern Miss. They're 23.5-point dogs. This team defensively is starting to figure it out, but you just don't know what you're going to get offensively from this UTEP team. They want to have an identity of running the football, but they've been held to under 30 yards total rushing for 4 games this year. It's just so hit and miss with this UTEP team that games like that, games where you're thinking, oh, wow, that spread is just ridiculous. UTEP is bad, but they can't be that bad. I would kind of go with my gut instinct on that one, and that's kind of what that Southern Miss game was, what that Western Kentucky game was, what the UTSA game could be next week as well. That could be UTSA could be a 17, 18-point favorite, but UTEP traditionally has played UTSA well at home. Little factors like that go into that, because I think if you're looking at the X's and O's, right now UTEP has no identity on either side of the ball to really break down or any positives. So, the rest of the season, my advice would be kind of stay away from UTEP a little bit, just because they're so unpredictable. There's nothing, really set unless they're going to Middle Tennessee, and Brett Stockstill's playing in Middle Tennessee, the 22-point favorite. Well, in that case, I would definitely lean with Middle Tennessee, but there's just so many questions with this UTEP team going forward. And, Mike Price has brought a little bit of energy. Crazy to think of as an offensive coach Mike Price has been. He's really energized his defense as well as they played the last couple of weeks. But it's going to be real interesting to see, now that Mike Price has 2 weeks, a bye week, and a full week to prepare to UTSA, how hands-on he can be with the offense and maybe generate something. UTEP has not scored a second-half touchdown in the past 4 games, I believe. Now that's 8 quarters where they haven't reached the end zone offensively in the second half, and that is a huge, huge problem, and that's why it's just so hard. This UTEP team offensively is just a complete enigma, but there's no doubting of how bad this team really is though at this point.
Now, I don't know what kind of job this is for whoever's interested in taking it. It's in the state of Texas, so you're going to have a lot of good high school players to pick from. Are you hearing anything about, who they're going to target? Is there anybody that you would prefer?
At this point, the craziest thing, the craziest kind of wrinkle to the situation is UTEP's also in the middle of an athletic director search. So I've heard some names. Graham Harrell's been a name that's been thrown around. Eric Morris, the offensive coordinator at Texas Tech, the name's been thrown around. But I don't buy into any of that until there's an athletic director hired. I don't know when UTEP's going to do that, but I've heard a lot of names. Mike Canales' name came up, the quarterback coach at Tennessee, and I'm thinking those names are probably from agents, guys that are around him, because, right now, without an athletic director, it's really hard to kind of gauge where UTEP's going to go. Now, where I want them to go is somebody like a Graham Harrell, is somebody like an Eric Morris, somebody that can bring in an air raid system where, it's great to recruit 3-star athletes, but you don't really need to recruit the cream of the crop for an air raid. You can get away, with having, 2-star guys that are under recruited that can fit a system. That's what UTEP needs. They need a unique system to come in here and really kind of shake things up. This run 2 tight end set, 2-back system, power scheme isn't going to do anything here at UTEP. You need somebody with a unique system. And my first guy that I would go after would be Graham Harrell. Honestly, if I'm dreaming, I'm going after Sonny Cumbie, but let's be for real. Sonny Cumbie turned down a fresh $1 million from Texas last year. He's not coming to UTEP. So looking at a guy like Graham Harrell would be a perfect fit for UTEP. He kind of grew up in West Texas in the sense, playing at Texas Tech, and he's, what he's done at North Texas, making him one of the best offenses probably in all Group of 5. That's something UTEP really, really desperately needs. They need some type of offensive scheme to help recruit to and to help put up points and to help, kind of hide UTEP's tough recruiting profile that they have. And I think you bring in a guy like that with the unique system, that'll be well. But as of right now, anything official or concrete that I've been able to report on, I don't think so, because once UTEP has that athletic director in place, I think then you'll start seeing some movement on the UTEP job for sure.
So I imagine that's something that you're covering at length over there at Miner Rush, the SB Nation home of the UTEP Miners. What else you got going on over there?
Yeah, it's kind of slow during the bye week this week. We have, taking a little break this week after a tough 0-7 start. But we'll also have some college basketball stuff coming up this week. College basketball just 9-10 days away from exhibitions getting started, so we'll be previewing that. We also have our Conference USA Power Rankings that were up there from our 18 voters that throwing their votes all week, and then I'm going to be doing a podcast later on this week, kind of breaking down Conference USA and giving a little Conference USA basketball. So a little bit of slow content this week because of the bye week, but next week we'll be right back at it with the UTSA UTEP preview, and also basketball. Basketball's coming up, so we'll get your UTEP basketball fix, little Conference USA basketball as well.
And you can follow Alex on Twitter at NicholasAlex915 and then at SBNMinorRush is the UTEP blog. Alex, great to have you on the program again, man. Thank you so much for joining us, and hopefully we'll talk to you again soon.
Yes, sir. Thanks for having me. Have a good one.